Hey everybody, it's Bradley with the Insurance Guys podcast here. Before we get started today, I wanted to tell you about this week's sponsor. You know how your clients get overwhelmed by how confusing insurance is? Well, insurance agents tend to feel the same way about online marketing. Let Uptown Marketing help make sense. Martina is the owner. She's a very, very good friend of ours. Head on over to uptownmarketing.com to check them out.
Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless host and leader, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist for I Protect Insurance and Financial Services, based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Saraland, Alabama, parade first team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
Great, Scott. How are you today?
That might have been my best intro
I
for
was
the day.
actually thinking that.
For the 250,000 insurance agents listening to this right now, that was probably my best intro of our entire batch filing podcast today.
That might be your best one ever.
Drop the mic and go to the house. Guys, I am excited to be in Mobile, Alabama today. We have had a big day. Bradley and I have done so many podcasts today, and we actually have this on camera that we actually, please tell the audience that what I'm saying is the truth. We ate lunch during a podcast.
We did because we were so cramped.
I actually
Very quietly. Like,
yeah. Well, I was eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich like I was trying.
He got called to the mic.
I was like, I was eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich, guys, like I was trying to keep a group of kindergartners asleep in their classroom during nap time today. That is a true story, I promise you. Guys, we are excited to have our guest on the podcast today. I'm proud to have him here. I'm excited to talk insurance with – I can talk insurance with anybody, but anybody that I find has the passion, the drive, the determination – and the things that you need to be successful in your agency today. He's one of those guys.
I don't know there's anybody more passionate about it than him.
100% agree. 100% agree. So with that being said, let me bring our guest on today. He is originally from Hasbrook Heights, New Jersey, and he lives in Poughkeepsie, New York. He studied at the University of Albany, and he is married to the beautiful Tina, and they have two beautiful kids, and more importantly than all of that, he is a shareholder and producer with Fraley and Rayco Inc. And guys, I want to go ahead and introduce to you the other incomparable Mr. Billy Van Jura. How are you doing, Billy?
I'm doing excellent. I was saying I listened to a handful of your podcasts to kind of warm up and make sure I could be as good a guest as I can be, and that was exactly what I was looking forward to. I'm sitting here smiling.
That is awesome, dude. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I don't know if this is I'm holding in my hand what looks like a screenplay for something that you would see for a movie in Hollywood. It is front and back. I've read over a lot of this, and it really, to me, is kind of a manifesto. Would you agree or disagree with that?
That wasn't the initial intention.
Okay.
But about 30 pages in, I was like, gosh, I think I'm onto something here.
Right.
And then I looked up, geez, like this is reading more like it's not a mission statement. It's more just a combination of things that probably could be called a manifesto. That's for sure. It's a work in progress. I spent probably a year or two in, so if you flash back to where you guys are, we're probably where Bradley is now, deep in the trenches, getting an operation going.
Right.
I took all the stuff that was annoying me from the captive side, and when I would redo the transaction as an independent, I would write it down. I'd write a paragraph, right? It's kind of choppy how it's laid out there, but that's essentially what would happen is I would have this transaction, and I would summarize it. And yes, it kind of bled into that manifesto, really long thing. And next thing you know, I've got whatever it is, 60 pages of stuff. And I'm like, I got to do something with this.
Dude, I'm gonna tell you what this is. I'm gonna tell you what this is right now, Billy. Are you ready? This is a damn good start to a book.
Well, that feels good.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's what this is. Like, it looks like to me, based on the information and what you've written here, it is a really good start to creating a book that you could obviously write and have published, and then, of course, you could mark that off the bucket list of things you've done in your life, right?
Well, it's on that list, but similar, and you guys say it over and over, like you will do this podcast like for yourselves, right? And I appreciate that. Well, you're meeting all these people and you're sharing information and you're doing good things. And the thing I don't say never, but I certainly didn't want to be the guy writing a book, that book is a business card kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to write a book to say I've got a bestseller. That's cool. That's a nice thing to put in the profile.
Right.
But I'm really, really conscious of my time and how I spend it.
Right. And I saw that at the beginning of this, at the bottom of the first page.
And that's it. Every transaction I do. So if I'm going to put it out there, it's almost a practical guide of you don't have to do all this stuff, but I only wrote it down because it worked. So feel free. And I mean, that would be a good feeling to know, people took that information and did something good with it.
I want to go back now that you said that, because I love this sentence that you wrote here. This is on page number 1. I value time and have an immense appreciation for this finite and unable to be measured resource. I really like that. When I read that last night, it started making me think about time in that finite manner in terms of what we have as human beings. We've only got so much time on this planet. There's a lot in here that I really like, and I haven't gotten a chance to read all of it, but I have read quite a bit of it. And before we get into some more of this, what I'd like for you to do is I need you to do me a big favor. Climb in the passenger seat of my DeLorean and let you and I go back in time to when you got into the insurance industry and just talk about how you got into the industry and then just kind of get us up to today.
Perfect. So I had I played a little football in college. On the list of things to do was to keep playing because I knew I could. So I kept playing for a few years. Late summer of 2002, I was engaged at that point. My wife-to-be found a house she liked. Wasn't making a whole lot of money playing football and working side jobs. And, I ran out of contracts. And at that point I was exhausted. And I said, well, geez, I need to find a job. And I did a handful of interviews. And my mother-in-law, who's, kind of one of my role models for networking, said, you should go meet this guy. And he's with one of the big captives, and did some interviews, started with them in November of 2002, was officially licensed in March of 2003, and then just kind of rode that path for a while until I learned some stuff. And then, as you know, captives make changes. They made some changes I didn't like. I stuck it out a year. We had a second kid. I had another little project I did. And then in May 2011, I said, all right, I'm out. And went out on my own to do those things. And I know I've heard, Bradley say it on some other different topics, but the same thing of saying, I got a hunch I'm doing a lot of things right that I can't do while you have me shackled over here.
Right.
So I left. Went on my own in May of 11, learned the ropes. Bradley, I admire the heck out of you for saying, I'm just going to give this thing a go and get my own appointments because, it's like a unicorn riding down the rainbow, right? It's not easy it's really, you're not, the carriers don't push you that route. It's not easy to do, but I support it 100%. Started working on several projects while trying to grow a business. It's not easy, but I was doing it. And then a couple things started to work, and I needed some help. So I rolled my business into a larger company, Fraley and Raquel, and became a shareholder with them. Built out a pretty cool online program, and here we are. So I'm the guy that was playing football, ran out of contracts. I fell into insurance, no family driving me into it. I wasn't quite your story of resisting it for a bit. I never even gave it a second thought, but you did a really nice piece on looking at athletes and stuff. And everybody was like, you're an athlete, you should go into sales. Like, you should just go down this path. And that's where I went. And then here I am.
Well, that is definitely a natural progression for a lot of athletes out there, especially here in the state of Alabama, where kids that play at Alabama and Auburn have such notoriety, especially if they played a lot, and played on a winning team or a national championship team. They are well known, and so that kind of lends itself after college, if they don't go to the NFL, to kind of progress themselves into a sales career, whether it's in insurance or some other form of sales. A lot of those athletes end up in some form of sales career. So tell me some of those challenges that you faced going from captive to independent relative to, the nosebleeds and the hard knocks that you took, during that time. Maybe there's something in this that Bradley can take from that.
So unbeknownst to me, I was really being kept in a bubble. Right? You were taught what the company wanted you to know, and you had to focus so hard on grinding out that one product.
Right.
You did one of your things. You did a little bit of talking about life insurance, and you got really honest there. And I don't disagree at all. You just sell what you got in your arsenal, right? Because you got to make some money, right? So, but there was never time, nor was I ever encouraged, and I'll take responsibility for not looking. But nobody pushed me to learn the business. Nobody pushed me to kind of see what else is out there and learn this stuff. Unfortunately, and he's still a friend of mine now, and he even left too, I needed some help. And he said, well, I'm not leaving, but I'll help you. Like, I'll come along for the ride and see what we can learn together. Because he's a little bit older, and he knew a few things. And, that was a big help to see what else is out there. And then, I wrote the moment down early. I knew that when my broker's license showed up, I was in violation of my contract. So when the broker's license showed up in the P.O. box on May 10th, I knew that May 11th, I was handing in my laptop, and that was it. Right. So I didn't know what day I was starting. I just knew the deal I made with myself was when that showed up, you didn't want to be caught in violation. So you said, all right, I'm out. And then it's, ironically, I just had a chat with a friend of mine. He just left a large company, had been there for 20 plus years. And I told him this a year ago, and he was forced into taking my advice, which was, it's going to take you every bit of 6 months to kind of find those new habits, right? You're probably in that stretch now where you're either consciously or subconsciously in a rhythm now, Bradley. Like you've been on your own now, closing in on 6 months, right? So
we're getting really close to that. Really close.
Right. And a big sign doesn't pop up to say, oh, you got this now. But like somewhere around that 6 month point, I was like, all right, I'm feeling good here. Like I'm in comfort. I'm in that grind. I got my new rhythm. I got an office. Like things are good. Then you feel good for a minute, and then it all goes to heck.
Right.
So, and that's cool. You just kind of got to keep grinding on through it. But the biggest takeaway, and it's something I try my darndest to tell, and even tell the independents, is please, please, please expand those horizons. Have other conversations. Talk to people outside and inside the industry. Read a different article. Don't get too hung up on the sauce from one company or the other. Now, you won't make a lot of friends that way, right? You'll make a lot of friends, but there's quite a few people that aren't going to agree with you because you're going to expand your perspectives, but that's just kind of life.
No, I completely agree with that. I think that's something that this podcast, and I'm certainly not thinking that we are the end all or be all to insurance podcasts out there, because there are some fantastic insurance podcasts out there. But one thing that Bradley and I have tried desperately to do is to expand our listeners' horizons relative to exactly what you just mentioned. You get in your little captive agency with the other captive agents that are just like you around you, and you really don't expand. And for a long time, I was that way probably. I know a lot of agents that are that way. They're captive. They really don't talk to a lot of other people in the insurance industry. They're not a member of any organizations. They sell one product. It's exactly what you said earlier about you find yourself in that bubble, and they don't ever get out and really expand their horizons the way they probably should expand them. And I hope there are a few people out there that we've reached, and I know we have, that write to Bradley and I, and they talk about, hey man, I wish I'd have found your podcast a year ago or 2 years ago or whenever. So tell me about what you're doing today relative to being a shareholder and a producer in the agency that you represent right now. Are you writing personal lines, commercial? What exactly are you doing?
So the way I went about things when I went on my own, it was kind of simple. And it kind of goes back to that time statement of there's a way I'm going to do business, and you don't have to like it, but there's a way I'm going to do business. I'm not an order taker, right? And it's not that I'm going to hand out orders to you, but my goal is very simple. I work with good people who let me do my job. Now, many of these really intelligent people can prove that I should really be a specialist and learn the product line really good and build out a book of business and something. And I have no disagreements for that, except I really like meeting interesting new people who let me do my job. Right. So I insure some really oddball commercial accounts.
Exotic risks.
Oh, for sure. Like nothing crazy, but certainly like, all right, let's see if I can find a market, but it's because somebody else I like put you in front of me.
Right.
Right. So, well, okay, let's try this out. Now, in many cases, I end up writing their personal insurance. So when you look at the whole account, even though it was a little wonky to put on the commercial stuff, you know, at the end, from a math standpoint, it's great. But I really, given the choice, I think I prefer the personal to the kind of that portfolio stuff, where they, you know, the guy's got a couple. Your guy you had that went to Georgia and he was buying a big commercial property and then he needed some flood insurance, like that stuff there, where that guy appreciates the heck out of you. I believe it might be a little slower, but you could build just as good of a business working with him, because you're going to earn more per dollar working with a guy or a gal that is demanding but lets you do it on your terms, than you are taking on every package that you know can go down the street. And I think of, and pardon me for not remembering exactly, you two had a tremendous discussion, and I was laughing because I felt the same stuff. You run into that person somewhere, and they look at you, and you could see the guilt in their eyes of like, oh, shoot, like, I totally forgot I knew you and you're in insurance. I just switched, right? Like that kind of thing.
Oh, it's hard. It's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking.
It's brutal, but what I would say to anybody, including you guys, is, and you know, okay, whatever. Like, I tried, and I think I'm there, where I'm at the point where, and don't take this as an ego thing, but it's an attitude I have of, cool, I don't really need you. I got enough people, right? Like, I appreciate your sentiment, because at that point, like, it's, well, you didn't value me enough to even think about it, right? And there was a guy the other day. I don't have his insurance now. Last time I'd had his insurance was probably when I was at the captive, so like 8 years ago. But we keep in touch because he could be a good account. He drops me a note about some sort of specialty stuff, and I said, well, here's a couple of thoughts, just because I try and be polite to everyone. But my first line, and I couldn't help myself, was, please let me know what options your current broker comes up with, you know, because I know I'm not it. And he didn't call his current broker. He called me because his current broker is Geico, and they couldn't do anything for him. So I do my best to just focus on people that want to work with me. And quite frankly, they don't all have to be unique and crazy. You know, the bread and butter ones are wonderful, but they're nice. They pay their, you know, they don't always pay in full, but they're nice about it. And you kind of, I don't know, I look at them all as friends. I can even show you my Gmail. I categorize them as friends and acquaintances, right? Friends have bought from me and acquaintances just haven't bought yet.
I love it. I love that. You know, I would say the overall writing theme of this podcast, in terms of the podcast that we've done over the past 2 days, which has been quite a few of them, but I would say the one word that I've heard more than any other word over the past 2 days has been relationships, and building relationships. And we've even had a couple of podcasts this week that we've touched on, you know, writing good business, writing the type of business that you want to write, which kind of rolls back to the culture of the agency that you create, right? Because 100%. you as the leader of that agency are kind of setting the tone on what type of business that you want people to write inside that agency. So exactly. Yeah, Billy, I want you to tell me something. You've been doing this quite a while now, and you've done it in different capacities and different types of agencies. What do you feel like the real strength, your real strength is, if you look at yourself and use some self-awareness here? What do you feel like your biggest strength is in terms of what you do?
You know, I think the thing I remind myself with, and it's something I've said in a few other places before, but it's something I really focus on, is I strive to be a resource, you know, a real professional resource, a professional salesperson where the truth is, if I needed to, I want to have the confidence and the skill set that the product doesn't matter, that I can go do that. And I take that approach with saying, it's not that I'm going to be so good you just can't say no to me. It's that I'm just going to give you every reason possible to say yes. But at the same time, and the truth is, it's a tactic, even though it's just kind of part of how I am. I do not care if you buy from me or not. I'm going to do as good as I can for you, and I'm going to give you, you know, everybody I talk to, the goal is exactly the same. How can I improve your coverage and lower your rate? Period. You know, and if I can bring some other value. So it's kind of that attitude of saying, I don't need you, but I'm going to give you the same value. I don't give a darn if you're the single person renting with one car. If somebody trusts you enough to give you my phone number, you get the full treatment.
Right.
You know, and that's a stupid way to run a business sometimes, except they're nice people, you know. But hey, can I take one of your stories that cracked me up?
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's so opposite. You told a story, and I've gone to some of these things too, right? And I sit back and stay quiet because I can tell other stories about being laughed out of rooms. But you told a clever story about I think it's a smart move by the marketing person. She put you all in a round circle.
Yeah, right,
and
right.
She said, right. So, but I sit here and I know, listen, we all have there's all sorts of people I follow or read that I think are interesting, but. And it's probably your friend Gary Vee that said it. You know, it's like, well, you're not going to out Gary me. Like you're not gonna do that. So you're telling that story about nobody's willing to share anything.
Right.
But meanwhile, I've been in rooms. Early on, there was a cluster of companies that said, "Hey, why don't you come talk? You know, we're looking for more members." And I went and talked, and I can remember clearly not being laughed out of the room, but being laughed at by a couple of the partners. Like I'm sitting there right in front of them, and they're just laughing at me, and I'm just like, "Gosh, like okay, if that's how it's going to be." Now, fast forward, I'm doing just fine. The things I said I was going to do, I did, and that's good. But I shared all sorts of information with them. They didn't take the advice, and now they're all struggling, right? So it's I don't give it, that whole sharing and giving good information. It's similar. I sent those notes down to you guys of saying not everything's going to work for everybody.
Right.
You apply effort to stuff and it's going to work, period. I mean, you can apply money to things and it'll work, or, I think you guys probably interviewed Jason Cass and I go back a ways. And the whole Facebook advertising thing is cool and the math works. It's just not my thing. Right. So I think that stuff, it plays to your strength has to be just knowing your strengths.
Yeah,
knowing what works for you.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, that story probably resonates with a lot of people, especially captive agents that are in a particular area and have district meetings or regional meetings where you've got lots of agents that are coming in from a very similar, right down the street kind of place. But I will say this, and I've said this on a few previous podcasts, I do believe that right now, today, with the advent of the podcasting that's going on in the insurance industry, I think in terms of the overall industry, we probably have more openness and more communication going on back and forth across the country with different agents. I mean, let's just
that direction.
Yeah, let's just get all in the truth tree real quick, okay? Y'all want to all climb up in the truth tree real quick. For Scott Howell, and for, I'm probably a lot more likely to share information with somebody from San Antonio, Texas, than I am with a dude that's got an agency a half a mile down the street from me, right? Yeah. I mean, that's just common. I mean, that's just, I'm sorry, but that's just how it is. But, I think that overall in the insurance industry right now, today, there is more openness and more communication between agents than we've probably ever had.
We live in a sharing economy,
right?
In 2019, and it's not. I don't think that it's the industry is going that direction, but the world is going that direction. Where people realize, wait a minute, if I give some advice to such and such down the street, it's not necessarily, if he succeeds, it's not going to hurt me.
Right.
Back to the whole Gary Vaynerchuk, build the biggest building in town by building the biggest building, not tearing everybody else down.
Right.
And the example I always give in that regard is me and my wife, now we're 4 doors down from each other. We both run agencies, in case anybody didn't know that. Now we're 4 doors down from each other. We work 2 doors down from each other.
Right.
And we have every now and then we compete over the same client. Very rarely, very, very, very rarely does that happen.
Right.
And when it does, it's like, that's funny, And we mastermind with each other to the umpteenth degree. I mean, I tell her stuff. Like we talk about stuff that you and I would never talk about to a deep degree in terms of business.
Right.
And I think it's because of 2 reasons. A, there's enough business to go around. B, we both market in different ways.
Right.
Just because you give someone a piece of advice to do something doesn't mean they're going to execute it the exact same way that you do.
Well, what's funny about Bradley bringing that up is there was a book that a lot of commercial agents have read, and it's a great book, but it was entitled The Wedge.
Read The Wedge.
Yeah, I think
I'm not a fan.
Most agents have. But in that book, and I can't remember if it's in the foreword or if it's in the back of the book or if I just heard this from the guy that wrote it, but he said, I wrote that book and I gave away all of my secrets, all the things that I do. And he said, the reason I did that was I knew that no matter how many people read that book, 97% of them would never do anything about it.
That's true as well. So he also charged $52 for that book too. So he came out okay. That's an expensive book. Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know it was that much.
We'll take two things because I know you guys keep to kind of a time thing here. You want to know who the first person is to acknowledge that I sent him that book?
Who's that?
Bradley Flowers.
I'll be damned.
You don't want to know how many hundreds of dollars I spent sending that freaking thing out. And it's bigger now than when I first sent it out.
Oh,
so,
really?
Now, but here's the thing, though. I do that same as I get on the phone with random people or send random emails or put comments on posts of people that you'd never expect to hear back from.
Right.
Because it builds that. And I know you dropped a few words here and there, so I'll keep it clean. But I don't give a blank muscle, right? Because I don't. Well, if you never said boo about it, I consciously told myself I won. Because I took that confidence boost and said, I'm going to spend the money to print this thing out and mail this thing out and say, I think you might like this. And if nothing ever came from it, that was like my gym workout for today, right? That was my confidence boost. Take your sharing thing real quick, because I think this is really, really important in the work you guys are doing and willing to share things. If you got 250,000 people paying attention. You got an audience that respects the guests you bring on and trust your judgment for vetting them. I'll tell you what, part of why you and me and others are in this tremendous situation is because of how many lazy, ignorant people came before us. And that's not calling anybody out in particular. It's saying when all you're doing is focusing on commissions and loss ratios and allowing rate increases to happen, whose camp are you really in? You're not taking that Bradley Flowers route of saying, I work for you. I'm going to do my best to take care of you. So we agents need to be polite, but we need to be vocal to these carriers who are just not pretending like it's 2019, right? Yep. They got the money. They got the resources. If there's one thing we can share, it's a common interest of our carriers getting up off their keisters there and getting better.
Right.
And if we have, and it doesn't need to be a unified voice, but if we're at least planting stuff in their head and kind of ignoring that guy in the room that says, well, I just need more business and your rates are terrible, and you make the companies not pay attention. If we could all head down that path, if I'm going to give my marketing rep some genuine suggestions of things I'm looking for instead of just sitting there and letting them check the box.
Yeah.
Then I don't care if you're in Alabama doing it and I'm in New York doing it and your friends are in Connecticut doing it and Massachusetts and Oklahoma and everywhere else you guys got friends. All of a sudden, that marketing rep from whatever company that we've got in common is in some national meeting and you got 6 marketing reps saying the same freaking thing. Maybe that's what it's going to take to move the needle forward. So if we can, just on your own, be willing to at least share with those marketing reps. If you don't want to share with Bradley or Scott, let's face it, guys, you guys don't need anybody else's suggestions. You're good.
Right.
You don't mind them, but you're all set. But geez, at least help us all push this thing forward, because it's going to go forward with or without us.
It's funny you bring that up. I think you're exactly right about anytime you're able to share things with a marketing rep for a particular company that they have a boss to answer to, and then that person has a boss to answer to. But the more that company is hearing the same drumbeat, from across the United States of America, and then also, obviously the data plays out as well. And we can get into talking about data, but the more that marketing rep gets with his other marketing reps and they start talking about the same thing, well, I'm hearing the same thing, I'm hearing the same thing,
right? The
better chance there is of change taking place within that particular organization. And a lot of times it's not just about rate. A lot of times where we need to go out and talk to marketing reps and have a real honest conversation might be on the ease of doing business with that particular company, or hey man, we're trying to quote on your platform that you guys have got, and y'all are a multi-billion-dollar company. This company over here's got a much easier quoting platform, or here's what we're hearing about claim service from your particular company. all of those things, they keep hearing that over and over and over again. Eventually, enough of that will start flowing upstream, and changes will be made.
And I've had some conversations with some carrier reps, around those types of things. It's on some really advanced stuff, and they're open to it. It's almost like it's a breath of fresh air to a degree. Not to thump my own chest or anything, as I'm not doing that, but I've had, and they're like, man, I wish every agent would think like that, or things. Right. And I've even had some carrier reps run some stuff up the flagpole for me. Now what you have to remember is those are very slow moving. You're trying to get the Titanic to do a 180 very fast, so you have to remember that component. But then and I've also told some stuff to some carrier reps that I did not want told to other agents that did get told to other agents that so you have to also remember, you have to be careful what you're telling those carrier reps too. I've got one right now. As soon as I get a chance to dump them, I am, because of something a carrier rep did. To be frank.
Well, and I'll say this: Bradley does a much better job than I do of not scorching the earth. He is more diplomatic.
I think everybody would agree with that.
He is much more diplomatic. He is much more. He's gonna say something that's maybe a little soft, more soft-handed than I would. I probably run the danger of calling a marketing rep in a bad mood and saying something that I can't ever take back. So
I agree. I think we would both do. So I had one that particular carrier is funny about trees. I've told this story a bunch of times. I've never told it on the podcast though. They canceled this or were going to cancel this house because trees weren't touching the house; they're just close to the house.
Oh,
and yeah, it's like and the marketing rep and I love this carrier. This is not the person I was talking about I was going to dump, but marketing rep comes, and I like the marketing rep too, comes by the office and starts, talking to me, and what's going on, aren't you putting more through us? And I was like, well, to be honest with you, where I am, there's a lot of trees. There are a lot of trees, and y'all had this one client you canceled, and I'm scared to put my good clients, and this particular carrier rate's heavy on credit. So the rate was extremely low.
Right.
So for this person, so it was hard to find another carrier to put it. But anyway, she goes, well, why don't you just ask the client to trim the trees back? And I said, why would I do that when I can just write them with another carrier who doesn't care about trees? My client's not going to conform to you. You're going to conform to my client, or we're going to put it somewhere else.
Right.
So that's something like you would say. I was as blunt. You can't be any more blunt than that.
Right.
But I went about it we go about it in different ways. I'm not scared to tell somebody to piss off, and back to what Billy was saying, as far as like me going direct to all these carriers, because I don't have that cluster group, because I don't have that governing organization, I can do that.
Right.
Now, is that always a good thing? No. Is it always the right move to tell a carrier? Absolutely not, because if you piss off enough of them and you don't burn bridges in business.
Right.
But when it comes down to it, I'm working for my client. I'm not working for that carrier. Do you agree, Billy?
Oh yeah, and it's tricky. Listen, I'd like to think I sit somewhere in the middle of you, where I know how to. I'd like to think I can back off as needed, but then it's a lesson a friend of mine kind of learned together a few years back, kind of that respond versus react. But I'd be lying if I didn't tell you I've gotten phone calls from companies saying, could you please take down that tweet? We're partners. Like we don't want to do that. We don't want to see that stuff publicly. Like I've gotten my wrist slapped several times. And I said, well, geez, it's good for all of us. I was honest in these other 10, so I have to be honest in the 11th. And just because you don't like it, but I still deleted that tweet. Right. So, I
dare them to try to tell me to take something down. I'm not a captive carrier. You're not going to tell me what to do.
Hey, let me ask you. Hey, Billy, I want to ask you a question real quick.
And I may be overstepping by saying that, because there's some big independent agent listening to this going, you just wait, boy. You just wait. But that's my gut. I'm like, I'm not, of course, at the same time, I'm not going to be reckless too and put something out there that could get anybody in hot water on purpose, at least. Anyway.
Well, I want to ask you, this is how I want to close this podcast out today. We're kind of up against a tight deadline here, but
sure.
And I hate that, but I want to ask you about, you mentioned in your introduction that you had built a book of business and then sold, I think you said you sold that book of business to, I believe it's Fraley and Rakow. Is that correct?
Correct. So I think there's a lot of you continue that question. Yes, that's correct so far.
Well, and my question was this, after having your own agency that you built and then sold to them, but you stayed on as a producer and a shareholder, what are some of the major differences or things that you've noticed since you did that are different? Because quite honestly, I've never done that. Bradley's never done that before. Probably a lot of agents that haven't done that. And I'd like to know kind of what you've experienced relative to the differences between being out on your own and then being part of a very large agency.
So several short points. Mm-hmm. I'm certain part of the problem in insurance of why we are where we are today is because compensation models haven't been adjusted appropriately or in a mass fashion for decades. Mm-hmm. And I think that could have been addressed, and we'd have more agents and more licensed people selling insurance today. And, some of these massive aggregators wouldn't exist today if companies would have been more responsive to their producers as they grew and matured and became other things. So there's something I built out, and I'll hit you guys up privately just because it's something I can't really go too public with. But There's something I was building that needed a little bit more resources, needed a little bit more reputation than I had established at that point. And, that was available via a larger, more established agency that had been around for 50 years. Right. So the guy that's got a heck of an idea that you kind of like, well, that idea gets a bit more credibility when it's tied together with a 50-year-old company.
Right.
Right. So that, right or wrong, Bradley, I'm with you, pal. Listen, I feel I was listening to your origin story and just sorry, I got a young boy and we go to these Marvel movies, right? Your origin story. It's just reliving, May 2011 through 2012. Like that's the truth where these companies look at you and they scratch your head and nobody wants to try anything new because they think there's a risk. But meanwhile, they'll throw away all sorts of money on advertising. So there is a certain amount of clout that comes with an established agency.
Right.
And, to that compensation point, and Bradley, you mentioned a few things in some of your talks, like if you're running an agency, do whatever you want to do. But if you're hiring a young person purely thinking they're going to become your buyout strategy, I've got news for you. That young agent, depending on who they are, has enough tools and resources now because of podcasts like this that they may not be there when you think you're going to have them there. And I've seen that happen too, right? So I chose to, set up my arrangement a certain way because I knew the value I was bringing. And I think a lot of people need to factor that in.
So, and I agree with what you're saying. And I'll tell you something else too. When you go to work with a large agency that may have 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, $50 million worth of business with a carrier, man, I tell you what, when that guy calls somebody over there, they'll answer the phone and they can, They've got more clout. They've got more, I don't want to say the tail starts wagging the dog, but you certainly can get a lot more done in terms of, a lot of different areas when you've got that type of premium with a carrier rather than, hey, I'm just starting out scratch and I'd like to get an appointment with you. From right at that point, you're at the very, very bottom of the ocean trying to work your way up. So, well, Billy, I appreciate you being on the podcast today, man. It means a lot to us, and I appreciate you supporting the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Bradley, do you have anything else before we go?
Man, Billy, I just really appreciate it, dude. I love the fact that you sent us this your manifesto. I read it. I took it in. I'm going to read it again. The fact that I'm the first person to acknowledge that is absolute insanity that somebody wouldn't do that. And I apologize that it took me so long to comment on it. I actually sent you a message immediately, but when I look back, it actually didn't go through. But, man, anyway, Scott or I can do anything for you. And listeners as well. I mean, reach out to Billy. Billy is one of the more active people on social media, especially Twitter. Mm-hmm. It's funny when we did the Gary Vaynerchuk episode. I tweeted and said, "Hey, who's got a question for for Gary?" And Billy sent me like 35 questions. So that was good. That was good because it. And even though I don't think we asked any of those questions verbatim, that particular afternoon, Scott and I had our first session where we sat down to come up with questions, which is Gary Vee is the only podcast we've ever done that for, and we were able to draw from that. So even though we didn't ask any of those per se, they certainly inspired our questions. But it was interesting with that episode. You know, we had two goals. You know, one was to ask questions. You know, it would have been easier for us to go in there and ask nothing but selfish questions. Right. But we wanted to ask questions that we knew our audience would want to know the answer to, 100%, to help the audience. And we wanted to ask questions that he had never been asked before. And I think we accomplished both of those goals.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And just you guys need to hear it. You need to keep doing things like this. I don't do it. Podcast is not my thing. I write a fair amount, but like we need to continue to push forward, even when we don't think anyone's reading or listening or whatever, because the truth is, this is good, candid information you guys share, and I hope you all continue to do it. Look, I appreciate you guys giving me a chance to chat.
And the fact that, and here's the thing, if you're putting stuff out there into the world, okay, if you're putting a blog out there, if you're putting an Instagram post, if you're doing a video, if you're doing a podcast, and people are listening, there is a tremendous sense of responsibility that comes with that.
Agreed.
And Scott and I don't take that lightly with this. You know, the fact that we have so many people listening to us every month, or every day, every week, you know, the fact that that's the case, I mean, even if we hated this whatsoever, we would still do it because I feel like we owe that to these people because they're literally hanging on every word sometimes, you know? So, I mean, and just because you don't think somebody's listening or watching doesn't mean they're not.
Oh, they're always watching.
And there's I mean, I guarantee you as many people as there are that engage with your social media posts, there's probably double that took it in that didn't engage. And guess what? That's still an impression. That's still somebody taking it in. Don't you agree?
To your point, Bradley, and I've had this conversation with my wife probably 3 times that, you know, we will post something personal on Facebook or Instagram. Like I posted a picture of my wife this morning on Facebook.
Saw it.
Or we'll post something about our house, you know, us redoing that house that we did. I'll be walking down the street, and I don't know people in Arab, Alabama. I've never lived in Arab, Alabama, and I'll be walking down the grocery store aisle, and somebody will stop me, and they'll say, "Hey, I saw your post on Facebook about the house." And I can tell that there are, and she and I talk about it all the time. You are exactly right. However many people like or comment, it's probably more than double. It's probably triple or quadruple the people that see it, don't ever say anything about it, but they're watching. Does that make sense?
I guarantee you, it's at least double.
At least.
Right, and it's and it's on the contrary of that is why I think the person who gets engagement on their business page, or any page, and doesn't engage back is a terrible person, Because I've tried to do better. And I don't mean that literally, but that's not a good thing to do because I remember Bradley Flowers in 2013 was literally posting 10 times a day. On Facebook. Literally, I would wake up in the morning. I had my content bank I would pull from. I would schedule 10 posts for that day, and no one was engaging back for a year. I would get 3 engagements. I would get myself, my mom, and my grandmother. So I remember that. And there's a kid out there, a guy or a gal out there right now that's doing that, that's getting 0 engagement. And for you to get engagement on your social pages and to not engage back is the equivalent of seeing somebody you know walking down the sidewalk and looking away. You know?
I agree.
And so you need to engage with the people you get, but you're also getting the ghost followers that are not watching.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. I think it happens a lot more than we know. And then to that point, when you start getting hundreds of people, I posted a video on the 4th of July that got over 3,000 views on Facebook, and I guarantee you 6,000 people saw it, you know. So, guys, listen, Billy, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm going to go ahead and close this thing out. Guys, remember, rewards come from action, not discussion. Get your ass out from behind that desk today. Go out into the big bad world, build relationships with people, love people up, What was the term Scott Tyndall used yesterday? Relentless optimism.
Relentless optimism.
Relentless optimism. I love it. Go out into the big bad. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, go out into the big bad world today and sell insurance and make money for your family, your kids, your wife, your husband, your parents that are struggling out there. And write good business for the agencies that you represent. Write good business for the companies that you represent. Bradley Flowers, I love you.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Billy.
Hey, Billy, have a great week. Have a great rest of the week. Guys, you are listening to the Insurance Guys podcast, and we'll see you back here real soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Insurance Guys podcast. If you need to know more about me or you need to get in touch with Scott, you can always reach me at theinsuranceguyonline.com. or email me at iprotectins@gmail.com. And if you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradley Flowers, go to bradleyflowersinsurance.com or email him at bradley@saralandinsurance.com. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you again real soon on the next episode of The Insurance Guys. Take care.